You will kneel before this court, human, or you will be broken." The words rang out, sharp as blades against stone, cutting through the sterile air of the tribunal chamber. But the man chained at its center did not bow. He lifted his scarred face, gray eyes unblinking, and smiled with the kind of quiet defiance that carries more weight than warships. "Try me." The chamber's architecture was designed for intimidation. Rib-like pillars of obsidian reaching toward a vaulted ceiling, the floor a polished crystal that reflected every movement in distorted echoes. The air shimmered with energy, making the breath heavy. The audience, a sea of armored guards and robed counselors, sat in silence, watching the newly revived human like one might watch a predator taken from myth and forced into a cage. Rylan Vey had been dragged back from centuries of sealed stasis. His body bore the hardness of someone carved by war. Broad shoulders that spoke of battle survived, a scar running across his left jaw that refused to fade, hair cropped brutally short, and those unyielding eyes that seemed to belong to a creature incapable of surrender. He stood shackled, but his posture betrayed no hint of submission. His very presence unsettled the chamber, as though history itself had slipped its bindings and stalked back into the light. Emerald scales gleamed as Commander Krozithvor stepped forward, ceremonial armor glinting with black and gold edges. His golden eyes, slit like a predator's, glowed faintly in the dimness, and when he bared his teeth they were sharp enough to rend flesh. His voice slithered with contempt. "Your kind was erased because it was weak, unstable, a threat to order. You were meant to rot in silence." Ryland's laugh rolled through the chamber, deep and utterly inappropriate. "Funny way to say we couldn't kill you, so we shoved you in the basement." His words rang with mockery, but there was iron beneath them. The Veil Wardens shifted uneasily, silver-armored, faces hidden behind insectoid helmets. Their glowing pikes hummed with restrained energy. Even faceless, their discomfort showed in the slight sway of their stance, as though doubt was seeping into their bones. Above them, at the highest seat, rose Arindral the Pale. Tall, skeletal, his silver skin stretched over bones that looked carved from moonlight, and from his head jutted long, crown-like horns. His robes, black and shimmering with currents of energy, flowed around him as though the fabric were alive. He raised a hand, thin and cold, and the chamber stilled. His voice was low, ritualistic, each syllable dropping like a stone into water. "Rylan Vey of Terra, you were sealed away because your existence endangered balance. You stand accused of atrocities committed against the Accord, and for the contagion of defiance that your people spread." Rylan spat blood onto the perfect crystal floor, the red stark against white. "And what did your Accord do to Kansas?" The translator whispered the words into alien ears, but the weight of them was heavier than any language could bear. The tribunal crowd stirred. The word meant nothing to them, yet they felt its gravity, a shard of grief sharpened into defiance. Commander Vor snarled, stepping close, his scaled chest heaving. "Do not cloak your crimes in riddles of forgotten dirt. You will kneel." "Not for you," Rylan replied, his voice steady, almost calm. "Not for anyone." The Arbiter's silver face remained unreadable, yet his robes flickered with violent light. "Then we will show your mind to the galaxy. We will peel away your laughter, your bravado, your lies. We will display your true nature, so all species will understand why humanity must never return." For the first time since waking, Ryland's laughter stopped. His eyes, once bright with mockery, hardened into something far more dangerous. He leaned forward, chains groaning, his scar deepened by shadow. "You really don't want to do that." The hush that followed was suffocating. Every alien in the chamber felt the weight behind his words, a pressure like an unseen storm pressing at their lungs. Even the Veil Wardens tightened their grips on their pikes, their armor humming nervously. Vor hissed through his teeth, forcing bravado into the stillness. "Empty threats from a relic. You have nothing left to give." Ryland smiled, not with humor, but with the terrible calm of someone who has nothing left to lose. "Then ask yourself why you're afraid." The Arbiter rose higher, his skeletal frame towering, horns casting spidery shadows across the floor. "Fear is weakness. What we fear, we erase. That is why your kind was sealed away. You are contagion, human, a plague of madness. Laughter in the face of despair. Unity in the shadow of annihilation. Hope where there should only be surrender. Such things do not serve order. The soldier's jaw clenched. He let the arbiter's words sink, then answered with a whisper that carried farther than any shout. That's why you lost. The words hit the chamber like a pulse. For a moment, even the ever-present hum of alien machinery seemed to falter. The crowd stirred, uneasy, their whispers a tide of confusion and fear. Vor's tail lashed against the floor, claws screeching sparks across crystal as he snarled in frustration. The arbiter's black robes rippled violently, as if stirred by invisible winds. And Ryland stood there, bound in chains but taller than any of them, scar catching the light like a mark of warning. He let the silence drag, let it gnaw at the edges of their certainty. Then he leaned forward, voice sharp as a blade. You wanted to know why we were locked away. You thought it was because we were monsters. The truth? It's because you couldn't kill us. Because you knew what happens when one of us refuses to quit. The crowd erupted into noise, whispers, gasps, a wave of unease crashing against the walls. The Veil Wardens faltered, some lowering their pikes by instinct alone. The arbiter's silver hands curled into claws, his voice trembling for the first time as he shouted above the din, "Contain him." But the fear was already loose. It moved like wildfire through the chamber, not at what the human had done, but at what he might still do. And now, you who have watched these words etched into memory, you who bear witness across time and silence, take this truth with you. Power is not the roar of those who command obedience. It is the quiet defiance of one who stands unbroken when the world demands his knees. The chamber dimmed as the arbiter raised his skeletal hand. From above, a mechanism unfolded, its arms thin as needles, its surface pulsing with pale light. The crowd leaned forward, restless. Memory probes, devices forbidden in half the known galaxy, instruments that could strip the truth raw from any mind. The arbiter's voice carried ritual gravity. Let the court see what lies within the human soul. Let memory stand as evidence. Chains bit into Ryland's wrists as the tendrils lowered toward his skull. His jaw tightened, but he did not resist. Your funeral, he muttered, steel-gray eyes watching their descent with a soldier's patience. The probes latched on, and the chamber dissolved into visions. The first memory was fire, a world burning, the sky red with smoke, and alien war machines thundering across the ground. A squad of human marines huddled behind shattered walls, weapons nearly spent. The tribunal gasped as Ryland, younger but no less scarred, ripped the casing from a maintenance drone and strapped explosives to its frame. Duct tape sealed the edges. He slapped the drone as if waking a stubborn mule and sent it charging at the enemy. The explosion consumed the battlefield in blinding light, throwing dust and metal high into the air. Through the chaos, human laughter rang out, not madness, but defiance. Soldiers slapped each other's backs, cracked jokes about surviving long enough to eat bad rations again. Primitive, hissed Commander Vor. His golden eyes narrowed with disgust. Reckless, suicidal, but the arbiter's silver face betrayed unease. The memory showed not fear, but a unity that refused to die. The probe shifted, pulling deeper. The tribunal was dragged into a dungeon of stone and steel. Human prisoners sat in chains, beaten, tortured. Silence pressed heavy around them. The audience braced for screams. Instead, the humans began to sing. Off-key, absurd songs about soda, cars, jingles no one in the galaxy understood. One line repeated, "Florida Man." The aliens recoiled in confusion as Ryland led the chorus, his bloody smile daring their captors to break them. The songs grew louder, turning agony into ridicule, stripping torture of its power. The arbiter whispered, almost to himself. They mock pain itself. Vor's tail lashed the ground, his scaled jaw clenched. They disgrace dignity. They invite chaos. The chamber wavered again, pulling them to the void of space. Titan's Gate, a battlefield littered with burning ships. Alien fleets encircled the last human vessels, numbers overwhelming, hope non-existent. Yet Ryland stood at the command deck, shouting orders between bloodied lips. Duct tape the engines, Chuck Norris style. He winked at his terrified crew, who burst into nervous laughter. They obeyed. And somehow, against every probability, the ships did not fall. The tribunal froze. Chuck Norris. The name rolled through the translator, empty of context yet heavy with dread. The memory itself carried the weight of legend, though none of them understood why. The vision shattered, leaving the tribunal chamber in stunned silence. The crowd shifted, insectoid helmets clacking as the Veil Wardens exchanged uneasy glances. Even through layers of armor, doubt bled into their stances. Rylan exhaled, shoulders squared. Now you've seen it. That's what you call madness. We call it Tuesday. The Arbiter's robes flickered violently, his skeletal hands trembling as though gripped by an emotion he dared not name. His voice cracked, colder than before. This is why you are sealed. Humanity is contagion. Madness that spreads. Hope where there must be none. Laughter where there should be silence. Such things erode obedience. Vor lunged forward, his teeth flashing, fury dripping from his voice. Enough. His claws scraped sparks against the crystal floor as he shoved past the guards. You are no contagion. You are nothing. A relic that should have been ash. Rylan tilted his head, scar catching the dim light. Funny. You're shouting an awful lot for someone who isn't scared. The words stung sharper than blades. Vor's scaled lips peeled back, rage twisting his face. He raised a clawed hand, but the Arbiter stopped him with a hiss. The air around them thrummed with tension, as though the chamber itself resisted what it had witnessed. The audience began to murmur. The sound wasn't outrage. It was fear, not of Rylan's violence, but of what he represented. One Veil Warden lowered his pike, subtly at first. Another followed. The Arbiter saw it, and for the first time, doubt cracked his ritual mask. Rylan leaned forward, voice dropping low, quiet enough to force the entire chamber into stillness. You think you sealed us because we were dangerous to others. But the truth? You sealed us because we were dangerous to you. Because if hope spreads, you lose control. The Arbiter's skeletal frame trembled. His voice broke into a shout that rattled the ceiling. Lies. He spreads lies to weaken your resolve. But his words rang hollow. The fire of certainty that once burned in the crowd had dimmed. Vor, refusing to shift, lunged again. His claws slashed for Rylan's throat. Chains snapped taut as Rylan twisted just enough to let the strike graze past. In the same motion, his forehead smashed into Vor's snout with brutal precision. Bone cracked, blood spattered, and the commander collapsed to the floor, teeth scattering across the crystal like broken gems. The audience gasped as one. Rylan stood straight, blood dripping down his own brow, his chest rising with steady breaths. Still hit softer than Florida Man. The translators hesitated, confused, but the menace carried through. Vor writhed on the ground, clutching his shattered jaw. The Arbiter's robes flared, his skeletal hands pulsing with searing light. But the Veil Wardens hesitated. Some lifted their pikes half-heartedly, others froze entirely. The chamber was fracturing, belief unraveling before their eyes. Rylan's voice cut through the chaos, low but unyielding. You wanted to know why you were afraid. Now you do. We don't break. We don't kneel. And if even one of us stands, then all of you should be very, very worried. The chamber fell silent, but it was not peace. It was the silence before collapse, the hush before a tide overturned stone. And now, you who watch from beyond this tribunal, you who seek meaning in the ashes of others, understand this. Fear is not born from the strength of enemies, but from the courage of those who refuse to surrender. A single unbroken soul can unravel empires. The Arbiter's hands blazed with white fire, streaks of living energy tearing jagged scars across the chamber's air. The audience recoiled, shields half raised, whispers rising like static. At the center, Rylan stood chained, blood trickling into his eyes from the headbutt, chest heaving but steady. His smirk lingered, though a vein in his temple pulsed with effort. He had endured their memory probes, had survived their court's humiliation, but now came the test no words could mask. The Arbiter had chosen to end the pretense. You will not leave this chamber alive, human, the Arbiter intoned, his skeletal frame swelling as the white fire gathered. You have poisoned their faith with your noise, your defiance, your madness. Better that you die now, erased utterly, than that your contagion spreads. The crowd tensed, half in terror, half in awe. Chains rattled as Rylan rolled his shoulders against the restraints, testing them. The steel bit deep, unforgiving. He glanced down at Vor, still groaning with a broken jaw, sprawled on the crystal floor like a discarded weapon. Funny thing, Rylan rasped, lips cracking into a grin. You keep calling me poison, but poison only works if there's already rot inside the body. The Arbiter's flames flared, a storm ready to engulf. The tribunal guards advanced, pikes humming, forming a tightening circle. Yet hesitation lingered in their steps, a ripple of doubt born not from logic, but from the humans' refusal to yield. The fire lanced outward. A spear of energy shot across the chamber, ripping the air apart as it closed on Rylan. For an instant, it seemed certain he would be obliterated, nothing left but ash. But the chains, forged in alien fire, caught the bolt and glowed, redirecting it across the floor. Crystal shattered in waves, fragments spraying the crowd. Gasps filled the silence that followed. Rylan's laugh cut through, harsh and defiant. You built my cage too well, made it strong enough to hold me. Didn't think about what it could hold back. The Arbiter staggered, fury etching cracks through his mask of ritual calm. He raised his hands again, summoning a torrent rather than a strike, intent on vaporizing both man and prison in one catastrophic flood. But as the fire grew, so too did the uncertainty in the room. Veil Wardens looked at one another, doubt spreading faster than flame. The chains' glow, reflecting in their helmets, seemed to whisper of limits not even their Arbiter controlled. Then it happened. One guard lowered his weapon entirely, stepping back. Another followed, unwilling to be near what felt like divine contradiction. Within moments, the circle fractured. Rylan seized the moment. He leaned forward, voice cracking with both exhaustion and command. Look at your leader. He's afraid. Not of me, of what I remind you. That strength isn't his gift to you. It's already inside you. All I've done is show it. The Arbiter roared, the chamber shaking with sound. His blast surged forward, a tidal wave of pure annihilation. Crystal pillars groaned, the ceiling wept sparks. Chains screamed under the strain, molten light dripping from their edges. Rylan threw his head back, teeth gritted, every muscle straining to stay upright against the force. For a moment, he looked like a man crucified, defiance nailed into his very bones. And then, impossibly, the chains snapped. They didn't shatter from weakness. They split as if choosing to break. The sound echoed like thunder in a canyon, reverberating through every pillar and every armored chest. The Arbiter froze, his torrent breaking as disbelief cracked his will. In that heartbeat, Rylan surged forward, not as a prisoner, but as something unleashed. His fist, raw and bloodied, collided with the Arbiter's chest. The skeletal frame reeled, robes flaring like torn banners. The white fire sputtered, flickered, and guttered. Gasps erupted from every corner as the Arbiter staggered back, his composure shattered, his control fraying like thread under a blade. Rylan loomed over him, chest heaving, blood streaking his face. His words came rough, guttural, but steady. You don't get it. We don't fight because we think we can win. We fight because rolling over isn't in the blood. Break us, burn us, bury us. It doesn't matter. We'll spit out the dirt and keep swinging. The Arbiter fell to one knee, the light of authority draining from his body, robes dimming as whispers spread through the crowd. His command had cracked, and in its absence, fear inverted, turning not against the human, but against the brittle foundation they had once revered. Rylan stood over him, fists clenched, but he did not strike again. Instead, he turned his scarred face to the crowd, his eyes burning with the kind of fire no tribunal could manufacture. You think I'm your nightmare? No, I'm just proof that your nightmare is real, that you can't chain what refuses to kneel. The chamber erupted. Some guards dropped their weapons and knelt, not in obedience, but in surrender to the inevitability they had witnessed. Others fled, scattering like sparks carried by wind. The Arbiter, trembling, raised his gaze once more, but his voice had lost its thunder. It cracked, frail like old paper. This cannot stand. Rylan leaned closer, his grin as brutal as it was weary. It doesn't need to stand. It only needs to fall. And with that, the arbiter collapsed, the last ember of his flame extinguished against the crystal floor. Silence fell, thick and heavy, broken only by the ragged breathing of those who remained. The once mighty court, built for intimidation, had become the stage of its own undoing. Ryland staggered, legs trembling, but his back stayed straight. Blood streaked his chest, his hands shook from exertion, but the fire in his eyes burned undiminished. Around him, the fragments of fear reassembled into something new. Not order, not obedience, but awe. He looked skyward, as if the vaulted ceiling itself were too small for his words. His voice rang out, raw and unpolished, yet carrying more weight than any verdict. Remember this day, not because a human stood here, but because someone finally did. Chains don't hold unless you believe they do. Power isn't real unless you kneel to it. The moment you refuse, it all comes crashing down. And now, you who bear witness across distance and time, hear this truth carved from blood and defiance. No empire lasts forever. No tyrant's voice echoes without end. What endures is the fire inside the unwilling, the ones who rise not to conquer, but to deny conquest. Carry that with you. When they demand your knees touch the floor, remember, your spirit was never built to bend.